So yeah, I'm going to talk in the next 10 minutes about a short study that we conducted looking into motivational factors of survey participation in KnowledgePanel Europe. And this is work that I jointly did with Joke de Pratre and Livia Ridolfi. Now, so as many other panels, and then specifically also knowledge panels, and so for the moment, I don't see my slides move, so I'm going to try again. Yeah, now I see the second slide. Okay, great. So one of the challenges, of course, of online panels and also probability panels such as KnowledgePanel is maintaining representativeness, and then especially of underrepresented groups. And so our colleagues in the US have looked into various features that affect participation in KnowledgePanel. And so they found that incentives are predictive of participation for basically all types of respondents. But then they also found that other features like survey topic is differentially influential across subgroups. And so this is also where we wanted to build upon. So on that idea, look into this for KnowledgePanel in Europe. And so just kind of as a note, so our panels in Europe are quite a bit younger than KnowledgePanel in the US. So as you see there on that timeline, so we started recruiting for various panels in Europe in 2021, which also means that for these panels, we're still kind of having quite some big recruitment waves ongoing. We're also really looking into engagement strategies. And as such, the study that we conducted is very relevant. And in terms of topic, what I'll present today actually kind of nicely follows up on Kyle's presentation, the first part of his presentation. So we wanted to examine if survey experience of participants, and especially the survey experience of underrepresented groups, differs in ways that can help us explain their differential participation rates and engagement. So for example, we see that young people are harder to recruit into the panels, and on top of that, they also show lower engagement. And so do we see evidence of that in their survey experience? In terms of kind of what are predictors of survey participation and engagement, we kind of looked at the three big groups: intrinsic factors such as topic interest, survey enjoyment. We looked at extrinsic factors, and then mainly kind of the importance of incentives, and then also looked into some survey design features, complexity of the questionnaires, length of the questionnaire, timing that we're sending our invitations. And so, as I said, so we're focusing here on KnowledgePanel in Europe, meaning that in August of 23, we had about 9,000 respondents completing a specific questionnaire. These respondents were from France, Italy, Poland, and Sweden, and they answered questions about their prior survey participation, what kind of topics they find appealing, reasons for participating, and so on. And then I'm going to present you the results of just 4 questions out of that questionnaire, and presenting those results, I'm each time going to compare the results of 4 rather underrepresented groups, the digitally excluded, or so web reluctant, as they've been labeled in the previous presentations, the lowest educated on the panel, the over 65-year-olds, and the under 30-year-olds. And I'll each time compare them to kind of more mainstream respondents, the 30 to 64-year-olds with medium to high level of education. So the first question we'll look at is one related to survey motivation. So we asked these panelists what kind of factors typically influence their participation in surveys. And the percentages I'm showing here are those for respondents saying that that specific element is extremely important or very important in their decision to participate. And so we first of all see that across all of the groups that we looked at, so both intrinsic factors, extrinsic factors, and also survey design are important, but we also see some clear differences across the groups. If we start with intrinsic factors, you can first of all see, so helping others, allowing to express opinions are considered important across all groups. But for example, if we look at whether a survey is entertaining to take, you see that kind of this is especially important for under 30s. 40% of them said this is extremely or very important, versus 23% of the 30 to 64-year-olds. Something else that we see is that for our under 30s, what was very important also is, so an extrinsic factor linked to incentives, the fact that they get points that they can exchange for money or goods. This is much more important for them, especially when compared to the three other underrepresented groups: digitally excluded, lowest educated, over 65s. Also important for these younger panelists is the fact that the invitation arrives when they're able to complete the survey. Moving to the next question, also related to survey motivation, we also asked panelists what type of information they would like to find out about a survey before they agreed to take it. And so, again, there's various statements presented to them, and we look at whether they consider this information very important. Not that many differences for the intrinsic factors, but again, if we look at incentives, so the number of points you get is more important for the under 30, so 46% said this is very important, compared to, for example, 9% of over 65s. What's also important for these under 30s, or more important than for other groups, is how long it takes the survey to complete, while then for our other underrepresented groups, such as the lowest educated, what seemed to be more important for them compared to other groups is a description of the types of questions that will be asked. So which we thought was quite interesting to point out. Then moving to survey experience. So what type of information how did they experience the past survey? So we asked them about surveys completed in the past year, specifically for KnowledgePanel. And so here are some of the statements presented to them. The first one here in the table is a positive one. I felt that my opinions mattered. And there you see that more than 40% of panelists report that they felt this way very often or often. It's a little bit lower for the over 65s. But then something else that really stands out in this specific table is all of the red figures again for the under 30s. So on all of the negative statements, such as the survey included questions that were not relevant to me, the topic or questions were boring, these under 30s say they have experienced this very often or often, and they say this more than the other groups. A big difference also again for incentives, and then also whether the survey took longer to complete than expected. Now, so although this slide shows that the survey experience tends to be somewhat more negative for the under 30s, when we asked the same panelists whether they feel comfortable answering questions about certain more sensitive topics, actually the under 30s, their column is completely green. So for all of these topics, they were more likely to say that they do feel very comfortable answering questions about income and finances, sexual behavior, health conditions, and so on, while then the other underrepresented groups were more likely, less likely to say that they feel very comfortable answering questions about this topic. Now, of course, I need to add here the digitally excluded, they tend to have the lowest figures, but they tend to be interviewed via telephone. So there's also, of course, then an interviewer present. So that's kind of very quickly a few of the results, a few of the questions where we saw some very interesting differences. And given that we don't have a lot of time, I move to my final slide, conclusions and discussion. So we found some very clear differences across subgroups in survey motivations and also in their survey experience. Incentives and survey length were especially important for the youngest group, so those aged between 16 and 30, while then for the other underrepresented groups, and mainly so the lowest educated, digitally excluded, and then also the elderly, we saw that intrinsic factors and survey design, and then specifically the type of question asked, tend to be more important than incentives. And then finally, income and finances and sexual behavior are the least favorite topics of our panelists, although again, less so for the youngest group. And so given that, we see these differences in survey experience of underrepresented groups, and given that we want to better represent all groups, we believe that it will be important to continue making efforts to better understand and then also improve, where possible, the survey experience and panel engagement of these groups. Thank you.